Mr. Sowore, thank you very much for joining us. We are very honored to have you, and now the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I thought we were going to make it interactive, so there are specific questions regarding environmental activism as far as I've been involved. Sometimes I honestly think that in the last 30 years of my engagement with Nigeria, I've been somehow drawn in every major battle happening in the country. There was a time, of course, our battle was to drive the military out of power. It was a pro-democracy battle. It was a human rights battle to make sure that the rights of people in the country are protected under military rule, and also other civilian rule. We had to fight social and economic rights for workers in those days, also lecturers. So in the university, but the environmental part, of course, was made popular by Saro-Wiwa, who started in Ogoniland to fight for the restoration of Ogoni environment. And in the early 90s, what really put us in touch with Ken Saro-Wiwa was that he was part of the Campaign for Democracy also at that point, and had made a spectacular decision not to allow the Ogoni people to vote in 1993 presidential election, and they did not vote. Of course, subsequently after that, he attended the Sovereign National Conference in 1994 set up by Abacha after Abacha took over power, which was generally made to deceive the Nigerian people, to make them feel like they really, need to have a discussion about what is going on in the country. And then in 1995, they took life, they killed him. But in a nutshell, at the point the Niger Delta environment had been destroyed by oil corporations. This was started by Shell. There used to be BP, Chevron, NI, which is an Italian concern, and also French. France had its own. Total. So all this exploration in the Niger Delta had destroyed the environment of the Niger Delta region. But Ken Saro-Wiwa, knowing that it was going to be difficult to fight for everybody at the same time, focused on Ogoniland. And Ogoniland was blessed with a lot of deposits of crude oil and also gas. In fact, it is believed there are over 9 billion cubic feet of gas in Ogoniland even as we speak, which could last the country of Nigeria maybe another 40 years of gas supply. That has not been touched at all, courtesy of the struggle that was started by Ken Saro-Wiwa. After Ken Saro-Wiwa was killed in 1995, of course, a lot of young people, including little Oronto Douglas, started another movement by Ijo youths that started peacefully, eventually degenerated because of the action of the Nigerian government to a violent confrontation that produced some of the most popular militants that you hear about today. And just giving you this background so that you can understand where the Niger Delta issue started. But Niger Delta issue did not start with Ken Saro-Wiwa. It started a long time ago. It was this drive by the British for resources that started, the repression in Niger Delta region. As a matter of fact, it's on record that when the British came and wanted to take over the palm oil trade, because then there was no crude oil, they had a clash between them and the people of Akassa, which led to the demise or the depose of this removal of King Jaja Bopobo that we always hear about. The British came, they wanted to shut them out of the palm oil business, and they refused, and they confronted the Brits. But it's interesting that up until now, it's still the same Anglo-Dutch oil company that is the biggest corporate in Niger Delta, destroying the environment. So this in a nutshell is where the Niger Delta issue started, and the protection of that environment was what Ken Saro-Wiwa was asking for peacefully. It's interesting that when he was being tried, and in one of his last speeches in court, he did say that he'll be the last person uh, to confront the Nigerian government and the oil companies in a peaceful manner. It turned out to be a powerful prediction because shortly after he was killed, nobody was willing to confront the system with kid gloves anymore. So now we can talk about specifics.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Sowore, for giving us this very important background to the evolution of environmental activism in the Niger Delta, how it came about, the companies that were involved, and even before, of course, Ken Saro-Wiwa, how we can, of course, trace it back to the onset of the exploitation of the British people, even before, even before we started having the likes of Ken Saro-Wiwa. So we have a couple of questions. I would like to start with this one, taking some clue from everything you have said so far. Environmental activism has had a very huge success worldwide. I think we can agree. I think we both agree on this. It has influenced governmental policies. It has and receiving accolades in the process. And environmental activists, for example, like Greta, they shot to stardom and they became stars in the process of environmental activism. However, on the other hand, if we look at our country, Nigeria, environmental activism has not received the kind of attention. Environmental activists, has not received the kind of attention that their colleagues in international communities receive. On the other hand, what is the situation in Nigeria is all sorts of persecutions, harassment, confiscation of properties, and all that. So, what do you think? Where do you think we got it wrong, and how do you think we can move forward?
Well, when Ken Saro-Wiwa was speaking to environmental issues in the country, the military did not allow that to percolate. It was seen more as some troublemaker who wanted to stop Nigeria from making profit from so-called God-given, crude deposits. That was how Ken Saro-Wiwa was presented to the public, and also Ken Saro-Wiwa's situation was complicated by the Biafran War because he wasn't on the side of the Biafrans when the Biafra War was happening. He had a lot of opposition. I remember this heartbreaking situation that the day he was killed, there was a rally in Port Harcourt. I know it was sponsored, but to even find out that there could be anybody in Nigeria, 1,000 people in Nigeria or more, who celebrated his killing was heartbreaking for me. That was in NYC then. So he was never forgiven for allegedly his role in opposing the creation of the Biafran nation, and because he was on the side of Nigerian troops or forces. And he became one of the youngest commissioners in the history of Nigeria. I think he became a commissioner of education in Rivers State at the age of 28. So, and he was a prolific writer. He was publisher, and he created a show known as Bassi and Company that so far in the history of the Nigerian Television Authority had the highest number of viewers.
Interesting.
In the country. So, and he was a businessman too. He was doing business. He was into produce business. He had a big grocery store in Port Harcourt. So he wasn't poor, and all his kids were living abroad and going to school abroad. But I'm trying to say to you here, hopefully, you haven't lost me and I haven't lost you, is that Ken wasn't the beginning, but he was in recent time the most prolific fighter for environmental rights. And he opened the eyes of both the enlightened and unenlightened people in Niger Delta region to the fact that the resources belong to them, and came out with facts and figures and internationalized the campaign for what the profits these companies were making and damage they were doing to the environment. Was asking for and said that should pay back to Nigerians in Niger Delta region where they had lost to oil exploration. And he was able to prove it. He had videos, and Shell participated as it was later revealed in aiding Nigerian government to kill Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Omoyele Sowore involved in the struggle for environmental salvation in Niger Delta region. It was it's something that I think someday we'll have a chance to review and bring to book or those who are responsible for the atrocious killing of Ken Saro-Wiwa. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for offering this very, very important insight. Like they say, revisionism, is the tapestry of history. Yeah, right. Given the circumstance of the and peculiarity of Ken Saro-Wiwa's case, for example, there were diverse other allegations right under beneath, of course, his castigation. For example, it's his role maybe in the Civil War and all of that. So, okay, let's assume this was the peculiar circumstance of Ken Saro-Wiwa. But from 1995 down to 2020 in Nigeria, nothing has changed, right? So even environmental activists without such role, without such peculiarity, without such circumstances, still get similarly treated. Maybe not exactly to the point of being on, right? But still get this kind of harassment, and they do not get the kind of attention and accolades their international colleagues do get. So you see, so where did we get it wrong? How can we change the status quo? You see, so to encourage posterity, to have a role, because at the moment, I don't think no young Nigerian wants to be an environmental activist. Given what is current.
Yeah,
you get the point.
Yeah. No, there's no young Nigerian who want to be an activist. Period. Whether it's environmental, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's, local, education activists, anything, student activism. Nobody wants to be, because it's a very dangerous venture. The system is very, very vicious when it comes to the way they react to activists. So, so you don't want to blame anybody when you say that. But what has happened is that, you see, when you want to fight an environmental rights fight, if you have a government who is siding with your enemies, then it's dangerous. In other countries, even in the US, you have the EPA, the Environmental Protection
Agency. Yes.
Yeah, they are agency. Yes, they are very independent. They issue policies. They find companies. They sue companies who violate environmental rights.
Yes.
In Nigeria, the environmental protection agencies are working for the violators of the environment. So they are in the pocket. The Nigerian Army, police could easily be bought or hired to go and to enter a helicopter hired by Shell. Go and shoot villagers without asking question. In fact, Shell has its own police at a point, and they call them Shell police. They don't even hide it. They pay them special salaries. They are the ones who buy weapons for them and arm them. So when you have that, it's a double tragedy for you, because now you don't have an independent agency of government that's even willing to corroborate and fight on side of people who are fighting for the dignity of the environment. They are fighting against you, and that's what they did to Ken Saro-Wiwa, and that's what they always did. So that's the reason why you saw that in the Niger Delta region, people lost trust in peaceful agitation and started armed insurrection against the
armed
government.
Protest,
Yes, but unfortunately, the armed militants who fought for the environment, they themselves ended up becoming very oppressive.
Part of the system.
They became part of the system. They are billionaires now, and they themselves at some point are engaging in environmental degradation through illegal pipeline activities, in their own illegal refineries, because they are breaking open pipelines that are doing more damage to the environment than you can ever imagine. So but that is their only way of getting a part of what they think they're entitled to. So every other agency that has been created since '95 or even before then were not created to deal with the environment. They're created to make more money from the Niger Delta region, and that means that you lose the environment. We still have the case of acid rain in Niger Delta region. The Atlantic Ocean is destroying villages because the more of this exploration you carry out, the more you tamper with the earth structure. And then in backup file, as somebody was commenting, which I was going to say, you have people breathing in suits. You sleep at night and the whole of your nostril is filled up, and the level of cancerous diseases in Niger Delta region is way higher than it's ever been in any other part of Nigeria. But who cares?
Okay. Thank you very much again for your insights to that specific question. So we'll be moving now to question number 2, which is that Saro-Wiwa, which is our subject of discussion, of course, stood in opposition to the massive pollution emitted by the Royal Dutch oil company in Ogoniland, which you have explained to us very comprehensively.
Yes.
But can you say that at this specific moment, can you say that the government has continued this legacy? But let me stop right here. Does the government, in fact, accept that Saro-Wiwa has a legacy? That is question number 1.
No, they don't. That's an interesting part.
Yeah. So if they do accept that it has a legacy, what have they done to ensure that his legacy is operationalized through the regulation of oil companies to reduce the continued pollution and all of that? So if we accept now that his legacy is not being accepted, what are the obstacles that you see, and what are the reasons? What reasons can you give us
to accept the legacy of Saro-Wiwa?
Yes.
So as the country owes history a duty to investigate who were responsible for killing Saro-Wiwa. What were the conspiracies behind it? From the oil company side, the multinationals. So it's still, there are paper trails in them. Who was the person who carried out the hanging? But to let you know that they're not interested, the judge who sentenced him to death unjustly, eventually became the chief judge of the Federal High Court of Nigeria, Justice Ayuta. The prosecutor who helped prosecute Saro-Wiwa eventually became the president of the Nigerian Bar Association in Nigeria. These are recent histories. One of the judge advocates who was on the panel that killed him is currently the director general of customs in Nigeria. This Ali man. So all of them had social promotions. They're still in the system. So if this happened in any sane country, those guys are supposed to be in jail or be answering to some kind of sanction for what they did, or be made to at least explain how they all ended up in this, because there was someone driving all of that process. But what did we do in Nigeria? Everybody who participated in the crime, they're doing very well, except Saro-Wiwa and his family. And you probably heard his body has never been really found because they said they poured acid on him. I can't confirm that. After he was hung, his son, 3 of his kids have died since this thing started. His son, who came to work with Nigerian government at that time, died, I think, 2 years ago. One of his sons died of COVID this year. His 13-year-old boy died when he started the activism. So Saro-Wiwa lost pretty much everything. But the Nigerian state didn't lose anything. The people killed him didn't lose anything. They are doing well in the system. So that's what is wrong. So his legacy is also the cleanup of Ogoniland. even though the United Nations had come and said Ogoniland needs total cleanup, till today, they have not. In fact, they were saying that 3 days ago that they are awarded the contract again for the cleanup of Ogoniland. The army, the police, the repressive system is still going after the little activism that's left in Ogoniland. They're still there, actively hunting down activists in the area. So, what legacy are we talking about? The only legacy he left is in the minds of people around the world who appreciate what he did, not the Nigerian government that I know of. There's still no Saro-Wiwa University or Saro-Wiwa Highway or Saro-Wiwa Street in Abuja. All the streets in Abuja are named after the criminals who looted Nigeria: Babangida, Obasanjo, Buhari, Dongoyaro. All these criminals are the ones who have barracks, theaters, all kinds of public buildings named after them as we speak. So Nigeria must reach that point as well, that Black Lives Matter has ignited over the world, where slave masters and their statues are being toppled. To topple every street sign and and statues of the oppressors and the destroyers and the robbers who put Nigeria in the condition that it is today. But nothing like that is happening yet. So it feels like we have to start the fight all over again.
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree with your point, especially if everybody that was involved got all sorts of promotions and they're still in power and they're still perpetuating all sorts of evils through their diverse ranks, then it's such a very saddening situation. And as a matter of fact, the sort of pollution Ken Saro-Wiwa actually stood against has actually multiplied today.
Oh, absolutely.
You see, I totally agree with you that there's no legacy in question right here.
No.
So, but before we proceed to the next question on my list, I would like to take one question from the Green Institute, and one of the questions says, "The Nigerian government has failed to recognize the legacy." Okay, yes. This is not the question. The question was asking about environmental activism and the SDGs. That's what do we think? What do you think is the way forward? And now domesticating the sustainable development and through environmental activism. How do you think we can?
Well, you know that for those of us who know a little bit about these SDGs and international policies for local development or international development, we just laugh when we hear that there's an office of SDG in Nigeria. Any SDG office or any office that's created in Nigeria to further these international policies are just their own way of wasting money. If you hear about SDG now, next time you hear about them, they'll be in New York at the UN annual jamboree, and they'll bring some 500 people there, stay there for a week, 2 weeks, finance, jury, and computers. They don't even understand what SDGs are. So I don't really pay too much attention to when I hear this highfalutin buzzwords, SDGs, Millennium Development, all kinds of, buzzwords that are used to confuse people here, because we don't pay attention to them, we don't believe in them, and we just create offices so that we tick all the boxes at the UN, and oh yeah, we have an SDG office. That's our SDG officer, and then they repeat the same things every year they go to. But on the ground here, right? On the ground here, we have nothing to show that we are meeting any of the conditionality for the SDGs, that the UN had put in place. So because they come with performance indices and measures, so you can't find that we are meeting any of those here. So, but when it comes to the flamboyance of presence at SDG conferences, I'll tell you, Nigerians do a very good job of they wear the nicest suits, headgear, and probably talk the longest. But on the ground here, there's nothing to show for it.
Oh well, yes. Thank you very much for this your the very very interesting summary of the situation. Uh,
Yeah.
but coming from the point of view that I'm an optimist, right, and I follow the SDG progress in Nigeria. I can say Nigeria is not exactly doing so bad. For example, I think Kaduna submitted. Kaduna was able to submit the progress reports of how it has been able to domesticate it so far, and we have quite a lot of civil societies in Nigeria. They actually trying their best to ensure this is being operationalized.
Let me just tell you here. Right?
Yes,
Sustainable development goals are not, they're not things for Twitter, or
of course. Yeah.
yeah, it's not glittery things. Yesterday, I was reading on Sahara Reporters, which is a paper I founded, but haven't been active there for a while. One of the worst schools in Nigeria is in Kaduna State. Which Kaduna are we talking about? Look, it's easy for El-Rufai, as he likes to do, to grandstand by paving a number, a few roads in the metropolis, and then magnify it, get some very good photographers to put it on Twitter, and get a lot of influencers to tweet it. But what about the schools we are talking about that have no roots? Are they not part of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs? They are. So the problem with some of our NGOs is that
Yes.
they don't go beyond the cities. They are equally
Yeah.
as
Absolutely.
good as, yes. They are all covering the city. They are attending conferences, and some of these conferences are guided. So when you talk about SDGs, it's not about air-conditioned conference halls alone. It's about everywhere, right? And if I'm giving you an example, which I can send to you if you want, of a secondary school in Kaduna State that has no roof, has not enough teachers. Why are we using El-Rufai as an example of someone who's meeting SDG goals? I mean, SDG goals. I don't know how to say that.
Oh well,
And I
yes.
know that you said that you are optimistic, you're an optimist.
Yes.
Yes. So, but it's very difficult to live in Nigeria and be optimistic. And most of us are optimistic. We expect the worst and hope for the best, and we're still hoping for the best. But we keep getting worse.
Oh well, I absolutely agree with your stance. Maybe we are not. We are again. I'm going to speak from the point of view of an optimist. Maybe we are not where we should be, but at least there's awareness and the few steps are already taken. So we have now Ryan in the room. Ryan Thompson, welcome. And Ryan also has some questions for you.
Sure. Yeah. So as someone unfamiliar with a lot of the activities in Nigeria, I just wanted to hear from you. What kinds of areas have you seen progress in achieving some of the environmental and social goals, and what are the kinds of efforts that do prove to be successful?
I've seen a lot of things on paper, plenty of things on paper. I just haven't seen them implemented, because when we're talking about these issues, we can't divorce them from the issues that as they are before, and they became prominent and became internationalized. So, yes, I know that Nigeria has on paper a lot of things about how they want to address environmental issues. But I'm still telling you, they haven't done anything that I know of that can meet the conditions that would make me announce to you gladly here that, oh, yes, we're doing so well. We've just been able to reduce carbon emission. We have reduced the number of, gas flaring in the Niger Delta region to this cubic feet, or that we're capturing gas that we flare, or that what we hear from the Nigerian side of things, the government side of things, yes, we could be doing better, but we're sorry, the Niger Delta militants are busting open our pipelines, right? Just excuses. But in terms of strategic, agenda to end or start addressing so many of these issues, I haven't seen that. But we still have soldiers patrolling Niger Delta region. We have helicopters shooting at people who engage in peaceful protests. Some women, and the oil companies are still doing a great job of exporting crude to the world. And also, the Nigerian government and the military, security agents are doing a great job of stealing crude as well and selling to to international waters, for their own benefit. So that's what I see here. And if anyone has something different to tell me, I would be glad to look at that, because it's a question of it's a question of tests. It's a question of accuracy of what they claim when they submit papers to the UN and all these conferences that they go to. Because I've met a lot of journalists who come to this country with the belief that they're going to find a cleaned up Ogonian land, and they find out that they're not even allowed to go past Port Harcourt, so that they don't get to see what's going on. So I've assisted some of these journalists to go around. I personally participated in a documentary that documented how Chevron was assisting the Nigerian military and the kill and go police to shoot villagers. That documentary won an award in the US, led to a lawsuit in California. Chevron, with very fantastic big lawyers, won the case, but a lot of things were exposed in the process of dealing with that lawsuit.
My name is Omoyele. I'm calling in from Washington, D.C. So my question for you is twofold. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. My question is twofold. Number one, I'm curious about what you think the relationship between journalism and activism is. So in the example that you gave, you sort of demonstrated how you were able to provide access to some of these documentary filmmakers in order to give them access to these lands. But how do you sort of, for yourself, bridge the gap between these seemingly very, disparate, if you might, methods of activism? That's number one. And then number two, I share your, I don't even know the word. I think I probably sit somewhere between you and OLUKOYA in terms of my, I don't know, I'm a optimist or I'm a pessimistic optimist. You can pick your words. But I'm curious about if you could share your vision of what a Nigeria would look like that did focus on and emphasize and prioritize Black Lives Matter. What for you does that vision look like, and sort of pick and choose what industry you choose to focus on, be it environmentalism or journalism or really any of the things. So thank you for your time and your engagement.
Yes, thank you. So you're asking about journalism and activism. I think that I never ever presented myself as a journalist. I presented myself mostly as an activist who had used media, which is different from journalism. I think there's a difference between journalism and media practice, and if you happen to be alive at this time that we're all alive in, media has changed the face of journalism. That is to say that you can have a lot of content that can interact and can give bigger meaning to what context you want to present about socio-economic and political conditions of any area in the world.
Right.
In terms of Nigeria, the reason why I found media very attractive for me is that there's a whole lot of stories that needed to be told, and people sometimes ask you to tell just one side of the story. We just want something positive about Nigeria or Africa, because we're tired of hearing the negative news, destruction and death and war. But the fact that you also can escape from what real situations are on the ground. So media lets you tell the story through photos, interacting with videos and text, and other forms of media. I think it's where I come in. But also, there's nothing wrong with journalism becoming activist, because in very, very serious conditions that we find ourselves, everything we can deploy to tell our stories as aggressively as we can, so that we can slow down the process of oppression is needed. And I think that was what the Saro-Wiwas of this world didn't have during their own time. They didn't have Twitter, they didn't have Facebook.
Right.
Maybe we would have saved him if we had, if we could trend even a hashtag to say release Saro-Wiwa. So everything about Saro-Wiwa, even when he died, we didn't hear from Nigeria. We heard from CNN.
Right.
We heard from VOA, Radio Deutsche Welle. There was nobody who was sufficiently aware of this, but that landscape has changed, and it's important for everybody who's a journalist to have an activist side to it. You know, when we get to an equilibrium where senses of our leaders are restored, maybe activism can become a little bit less belligerent. But right now, it's needed. And the second question was asking what is it we need to put in place in Nigeria?
Or what is your vision? I think we can have a long conversation.
My vision for Nigeria is very straightforward. I want Nigeria that works for everybody, and I know that this is broad, right? But we've broken it down to the basic things Nigerians need to make them able to participate in a world that is just fair and egalitarian. You know, and I think, you know, we probably have broken it down to about 10 things, you know, of which security is number one. In some cases, I feel even security is not as important as power, energy, just electricity that we don't have, you know, and solid infrastructure that, you know, can social and physical infrastructure, schools, roads, that can promote the industry that we have on the ground. And of course, there's no way we can run away from the fact that we need a society that is not so corrupt that people steal more than they need. There are people in Nigeria who are stealing for the future of their children and the children's children and the children, you know, like
generational corruption,
generational robbers. That's what you can call them. Yeah. So, and of course, an economy that is all inclusive, an economy that provides jobs for people, an economy that is not about paper, not about percentages, but that puts food in people's stomach, provides jobs for the youth. Education is a big deal to me as well. And of course, people have talked about restructuring, but I have always believed that instead of restructuring, we need a revolution first. And then after that, we can restructure. You know, following that is health, tech, big on tech. Because my activism or journalism came from the advent of technology. So I'm a tech junkie in that regard. So, and I believe that Nigeria can provide the backbone for tech on the continent of Africa. But first and foremost, you need electricity. You know, you need to be able to charge your devices at a minimum. So,
basics.
So these are the basic things that I think will make Nigeria be a lovely place. And I've always felt that if Nigeria were to meet some of these basic conditions, it would probably be right to say that would be some of the happiest people in the world.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've been following up with your activism in Nigeria, and I will really say that you've really been doing a good work. But when you talked about the SDGs just being a buzzword and the MDGs, as aspiring youths, you know, and we've come to claim ownership of the SDG goals as part of the people's agenda. So how can we young people be encouraged to advocate for these goals, even as we attempt to follow the footsteps of Saro-Wiwa?
Yes. So I just draw your attention to the United States of America, and I'm saying this in very, very clear terms. Right? They are also aware of SDGs and MDGs too, but their problem sometimes don't go along the lines of buzzwords. And what do? They step out and fight it. Black Lives Matter is probably not one of the 17 conditions of the SDG. It's a matter of oppression. and we have police brutality. Maybe MGs and SDGs don't even anticipate that that would be a problem. But look at what people did. Young people in that country stepped out, for several days to spark a global movement. So you can have all these very flowery, beautifully written uh, SDGs and MDGs, but if you don't have the kind of leadership that can implement them, you don't have the socio-political conditions that can be reality, we are deceiving yourself. It's just like in those days when we were growing up, right? We love to sing the national anthem and the pledge. But these days, you don't even find anybody who wants to pledge to Nigeria, my country, because nobody sees Nigeria as their country anymore. It's the country of the cabals, It's the country of the corrupt. It's the country of the incompetent, the country of the oppressor. So it's the same way. I think young people must understand that, for us to even get to start talking about SDGs, we need leaders, we need a nation, not a country, and we need to have objective conditions that put our dignity and our presence as a priority to those in government. What am I trying to say? We need to elect our own leaders, not their own leaders who definitely don't care about us. So, and this might sound a little bit pessimistic again, but I think it's a reality that young people must face, that there's a fight that needs to be fought before we go and enter the SDG and the MDG bridge. Because the SDGs and MDGs have been around for a long time, but they don't sound to be around here, except, I don't know if you're in Nigeria, but I don't see anything SDG, MDG around me. I mean, Abuja, I just see a country that don't work. You understand what I mean? And if you doubt me, just look at all the 17 grams that is required for us to have SDG. If you see any one of them, if you see a signboard that looks like them in Nigeria, then we can come and have another discussion. All we see here is, that funny signboard. It says EB Teens. EB Teens, man. It's crazy.
Okay. Thank you very much for it. Thank you very much for it. Thank you very much for your detailed response. Secondly, I would like to ask, in terms of the Revolution Now movement, I want to know what really inspired it? What was the inspiration behind this movement?
The revolution has always been part of my DNA since I started as a student activist. I want a country that works for all. I want democracy, respect for human rights, social and economic rights for people, jobs, healthcare. That's never really happened. And in 2018, I ran for office to be president. After we did the election, we discovered that our grandpas and ancestors, the hush daddies and hush mummies in our system, they don't believe in democracy, they don't believe in elections. So, and one thing is very clear: when you look at the spectrum of reforms, and they don't happen, they cannot carry you to your next destination. You start thinking about revolt, and that revolution now came from a place of revolt against the system. That the system, for it to take us to the next level, real next level, not the fraudulent next level of the government and power, we have to revolt against the system. It's the people who revolt the most are young people, right? So that was where the idea of revolution came, and we articulated what we wanted, and they resisted us, arrested me, kept me in jail for about 5 months. But the good news is that everybody is coming to the realization that we really need revolution, and people are talking along those lines. People are starting to revolt on their own. Yesterday, I saw a video of a wife of police officers. This is unusual. Not anywhere else but Abuja. Here, they blocked the road and they said their husbands are suffering. You had soldiers releasing videos and indicting their big organs, as they call them. We haven't gotten there yet. There has to be this organic outrage that is coming from everywhere for us to achieve that. But it requires a lot of work, education, mobilization, conscientization, and we are all doing that now. So I see a lot of that. I just hope it's sustained until it's what we want.
Still on the Revolution Now movement. So I have a question just to continue from where Chibuke stopped. That yes, in history, when we look at history, right? For example, let's look at the global south, right? We had the French Revolution, we had the likes of Lenin in Russia. We have quite a lot of course, Marcus Garvey and revolutionists, of course, in the global south. And also in Africa, of course, we have the likes of Thomas Sankara. We have the likes of this man, what's this name of this military man from Ghana? And of course, to even domesticate it to our case in Nigeria, in the 60s, we had, of course, Nzebu, who did a kind of revolution. And when we look at all of this, it's all born out of the innate assumption that the status quo is not working, and there should be something which should be implemented, which is supposed to be better. However, with the tools for operationalizing these assumptions differs. You know, in the military era, they use coup. In the democracy era, we use protest and all that. So why did you actually choose now this specific period in our history, given that this is not the worst of it, right? This specific dispensation is actually not the worst of them. So why did you choose this specific time in our history to start the Revolution Now movement?
You know, I don't know what you mean by this is not the worst of it. Maybe you have not spoken to people who still go to bed hungry. There's a lot of revolutions that happen in the world happen for specific reasons. I think there are revolutions that happen because of shortage of bread before. So, you know, revolutions have happened for a variety of reasons. There are revolutions that happen even when people feel slightly comfortable, but they don't want to lose their comfort into the future. So there's no better time, in my view, than now, when you have been clearly told that you have some of the most divisive leadership, some of the most incompetent leadership. Hunger, starvation is rising in the country. There are no jobs. We don't have an economic system that is able to take care of us. The gap between the rich and poor has expanded. We have a constitution that is not operational. So, in the interest of the people, I don't think that most Nigerians will agree with you. This is not the worst. You know, if anything is going to be worse than this, I think probably it will be a pandemic. You know, wiped out half of Nigerians, and then you now say, "Wow, it's going to be worse." But look, people are dying as we speak. Right? They're not dying of corona. They're dying of inability to feed. They're dying of malaria. They're dying of, you know, some of the most unbelievable ailments, right? Because their system cannot survive the harshness. But when you look at it, on the other side of things, you have people who are building mansions. I've lived in Abuja for 7 months now, close to 7 months. And I went around Abuja a lot, seen a lot of mansions with nobody living in them. And then you go to the outskirts of Abuja, in the Yaya area and all those places. People are camping in one room. So what causes revolt is when you have a serious percentage of inequality and oppression and suppression of people. All those objective conditions that made revolution happen in other places are here with us. Maybe what you should be asking is, when are our people going to rise and revolt? That should be the question. That's what I ask sometimes. I wonder, is it police brutality you want to talk about? Policemen collecting 20 naira at the road, and a driver that refuses to give you, they'll shoot and kill you. I mean, what caused the revolution in Tunisia? A guy who was selling fruits, and the police came and took his thing and said, "This is the last I have." Came the next day, he set himself on fire. Next moment, that swept off all the leaders in the country. So,
yeah, I see.
So I don't think people here will agree with you that this is not the worst. And at any rate, must we always go through the worst?
Yeah.
Yeah, we must. We don't have to. It's yeah.
I think yes, that is a very, very important question, and I hope the younger generation has been able to, of course, learn some lessons from your courage. For standing up despite how much persecution you had to face. So I am aware we are supposed to bring in now Paul Omorogbe from Tribune. Paul Omorogbe is from Tribune, and I think he has also a question for you. So is Paul Omorogbe available right now? Okay. So he posted this question, so I think we can take it. It says, real activism in itself is a dangerous venture in Nigeria. I think we all agree. Environmental issues in these countries are at the back burner. What support is available for individuals who want to take up environmental activism?
I think what Paul said is really very key and important, because when they said there's an adage, an African adage that says that when trees fall on top of themselves after a tsunami or any kind of wind or tornado, you start by taking the first out, the one on top. That's the first record.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to an average Nigerian, the kind of problems you have that are stacking up on themselves, environmental issue, quality of air is not your worry. If you are still looking to eat, your least worry is whether there's an oil spill in your area or the gas is oozing in the atmosphere. You just want to eat, right? But ultimately, when you get to the river where you've been fishing, where your grandparents fish, and you discover that all the fishes are dying, it brings home to you the reality of environmental problems, right? So, and that is where it is important. We are still also living in a country, Nigeria, as a country, where people in denial, who are not in the Niger Delta region, don't actually really believe that is their problem, that there's a Niger Delta pollution, because they're not there. They don't, and they've been made to believe that Niger Delta people are just troublesome, and they are preventing export of crude, and it's affecting prices of goods and services. That's how they believe it. But regardless, people must take on causes, and I think environmental causes are very, very important, because they're linked to our ability to survive for a long time. Because if there is pollution in Niger Delta, because some of the pollution is airborne, it goes into the atmosphere. It would pour rain on your house in Ijebu Ode one day. It would affect your breathing in Lagos one day. It would also affect the economy that you so much badly rely upon to scrounge. So that's why we need people who can. But I will agree and accept that it's more difficult for people who are in the environmental activism sector to convince the generality of the people that this is important. Even world leaders, educated people around the world, so-called first world countries or the Western world, think about global warming. So how much more somebody who is in Nigeria who is just trying to make ends meet? If Donald Trump says to you that he doesn't believe in global warming, that he doesn't believe there's an ozone layer that is depleted, how do you expect a woman in Arubo or other places, in river states, to understand the implication of environmental activism? So it's seen largely as an academic exercise here. still. It's people like Ken Saro-Wiwa that made it easy for people to understand because he really did a fantastic job of carrying even the ordinary people in Ogoni land, whether educated or not educated, by tying their survival and well-being to the fact that these oil companies are just changing them, and by extension, the Nigerian government has kind of held them to ransom over the years. But since he left, I don't think the rest of us, we're guilty of this, have done a good job of telling that story in that direction.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you, and thank you very much again for this your insight. Especially, I agree particularly with this the huge gap between science and now the community, and how we deal with these academic concepts of climate change, global warming, ozone layer. How do you explain that to a local man? But this is where the civil society is supposed to play a role, and this is where the civil society in Nigeria has been lacking, because the civil society is supposed to domesticate some of these core academic concepts and break them down into everyday things, for the local man to be able to understand that your crop is no longer yielding, right? Because the temperature has risen, because there's global warming, because there's X, Y, Z, right? So this is where I think Nigeria as a country can actually also, this is something they can actually look to give more role now to the civil society, to be able to domesticate some of this, what I would call international understanding of a lot of these environmental issues. So we also have another person who has a question right now from the backstage. I unfortunately cannot see who it is. I think it's somebody from the Green Institute. Okay, in the absence of that, I would like to take one more question from the audience. So one of our audience said, in my research, the person is OLUKOYA. Said, in my research, the Nigerian people don't actually have adequate education and information about environmental impacts or even the SDGs. How can we get involved when we have no clue?
Well, I agree with Oshan, but it's not true that our people don't have a clue. The problem is that our people are so much weighed down by other problems, and we are also distracted by how we prefer solutions to some of our own problems. In which case, you look at Nigeria and how people interpret environmental problems. Some people think that when there's global warming or there's a disease or epidemic, they think it's some devil inside the forest that is causing the problem.
Yeah.
So that's why the churches in more hold sway, and they have the attention of the majority of our people, including educated people. So when people in 2020 still think that when you go and cut the forest in your area and you are confronted with some environmental problem that's the work of witches and wizards, you have a problem getting those categories of people to understand that, look, your environment is, your well-being is directly proportional to the health of your own environment. A lot of people don't know that. Yes, a lot of people don't know that. So everybody they're just consuming in a non-sustainable way. That's there. They're also partaking in the destruction of the environment. And when they are when the environment or Mother Earth visits its anger on the on its constituents, they go running to religious places and worshiping. I remember we growing up, and I grew up in the Niger Delta region too. There were sacred forests that people don't go to. It was later in life that I understood that our parents knew the value of the environment. That's why they don't cut those trees, because it was an equilibrium. They had to let the environment be so that the environment support them. But today, it will just take one Chinese man sold with a license to cut all the trees in one place. All of this is shipped to China, and then the next year you have no cover, and then you are wondering why you are always sick, why things that are supposed to keep you healthy in your own environment is no longer there. People who used to have fish that they get naturally from freshwater now have to buy frozen fish that they don't even know where it comes from. They eat it, they poison their system. Half of our people are sick, but sadly, they have no hospitals to go to. and they fall sick. And in those days, when our environment was healthy, our parents lived longer. We had people who were 105 years old, 120 years old. These days, if you are 50 in Nigeria and you die, people will be saying, the trial, the man really lived long, 50 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, go and look at the obituaries. It's 50, 49, 65 maximum. 65 is like the 100 years of those days. Because the environment has been destroyed and we have no natural cover that typically we should have. And it's everywhere. And I'm not making this up. This is our situation right now. And it's sad.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you very much once again for the response. So we have now Tosin Bogi with us. Tosin Bogi is an assistant professor from a university in the United States, and he has a question of his own. So Tosin Bogi, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to Mr. Sowore. I think it's very important that the session began with issues around Saro-Wiwa that a lot of people forget today, and that is something that goes back to historical memory and how we forget those who have done different kinds of things for us in the country. And it's particularly important because on Saro-Wiwa's name, a lot of things have been done. There are people cashing out, in different ways.
Yes.
Whether in government today or whether in different ways.
You're right about that.
One Nigerian Literature Prize. Saro-Wiwa was a great writer in Nigeria, and people are, winning awards today, but we're not thinking about, what is the relationship between Nigerian Literature Prize and, for example, Saro-Wiwa? He fought, as an activist, he was the president of the Nigerian Literature Association, Association of Nigerian Authors. And but today we are taking money from the same people who pollute the environment, and nobody is asking questions. And these are very important questions that people need to ask. People need to stand up to ask anyway. So I'm very glad that this is coming up, and and that you're raising these questions and building around Saro-Wiwa as an activist who lived and was killed by the Nigerian government. And these are questions that need to be asked anyway. But I also want to jump on the thing that you said about the how people make sense of of the environment, or make sense of the environment before globalization, quote unquote, and all of that. So there was the myth, right? Don't cut the Iroko tree. That was the rational myth to prevent people to cut them, to cut trees or to put nature into disequilibrium, like right. But my question, of course, has something a little bit different from what we've been talking about. And this is the question. And this is a question for me needs to be asked over and over again. How is it that multinational companies in Nigeria who are prospecting oil are able to destroy our environment with reckless abandon, right? Whether from the military regime to what is happening in Buhari's regime right now. But they are not able to do that same thing in Europe and the US.
Yeah.
The kind of thing that Fela was talking about, right? So you have democracy in your own country, and the military cannot take over, right?
Yes.
Countries. But in Africa, military will take over, and then you will do business with the military regimes in post-colonial countries, quote unquote, right? So is this just because we have local collaborators or politicians who collaborate with? It's always been the problem of Africa has always been we have local collaborators at every point, whether from slavery or from to colonialism or to the present moment, who collaborate with Western actors to destroy the environment, or that there is, of course, the racist regime, right? That racist idea that that perpetuates itself, whether through Black Lives Matter, we protest and all of that, or that very So I'm thinking about the racist control, right, of prospecting oil in Nigeria. So when the Gulf of Mexico oil spill happened, the environment was cleaned up within a certain period, right?
Yes.
In Nigeria, I'm from Ondo State, by the way. So the environment has been despoiled from, you can count that, like, we don't even know for how many years, from 1957
when Oloibiri was discovered to now, the environment has continued to be, despoiled. And so my question for example, is it just that we have local collaborators, or the Western multinational companies believe that they're dealing with animals, right? The very idea that you racialize the black body and the environment, you can do anything, to the black body and nothing will happen. So it's a racist undertone that propels the multinational oil companies in Nigeria to believe that they can just do anything to the environment and nothing will happen. Or is it just that we are dealing with cases of local collaborators who are taking money from? Or otherwise, I don't see any reason why all of these companies in Nigeria cannot do the same thing, whether people are taking money from them locally or otherwise, to clean up the environment, to do the same thing that they do in other Western countries in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a great question you asked, and you've answered part of it. But I will be specific that it is rooted in racism. It's rooted in racism, and that racism took the African continent to the kind of leaders that Africans were saddled with, even after colonialism. You see, the easiest way to understand what we are going through now is slavery. Like, if people can bring ships from their country, it's not today that the ships can arrive in a few days. Some of the ships will be on the high seas for 6 months, 7 months, a year, so as to physically and violently remove other human beings like them and go use them as slaves on plantations, as sex slaves, whatever they use slaves for, and they take the best out of them. There is no reason for you to doubt the fact that these corporations have that mentality as their own official policy in relating with Africa. Also, so many of these corporations that are carrying out these actions now have relationship with corporations that were dealing in slavery and buying produce from Africa. And also, it's important historically to understand that Africa was designed for that purpose, right? And part of it is also that they have gotten us to the point where we have accepted our inferiority. Something as simple as even the the English teams that we support today. When you hear about Liverpool, do you know what Liverpool represents in slavery? It was the Liverpool port received most of slaves, stolen goods, resources in the UK. But today we support their soccer team as if, most of our people don't even know the history of Liverpool. And the people who set up the Liverpool soccer team did not even look back and thinking, would this be offensive to these Africans who also play for the Liverpool soccer team? These are deeper issues, but I'm trying to answer your question contextually in a manner that you can understand that these things just don't happen from the blues. If you trace the history of Anglo-Dutch Shell very well, the people who started the company, you discover that their great-great-grandfathers were slave masters. And then when they claimed that slavery ended, they just transformed the company into something else, to buy produce. And when it was time for what is now known as oil exploration, gold exploration, they just simply just transition to something else. If something comes up tomorrow, maybe technology, Shell will start buying technology for you. They'll be doing something because they have resources. So racism is at the heart of it. There's no question about that. And but in the course of it, they've weakened us so much. But we have also weakened ourselves to the point that we as mean towards ourselves as a racist superstructure is to the continent of Africa, the environment of Africa, the people of Africa, the resources of Africa. So as I've often described it, Africa is like a hotel to the racists corporations and the people who have come to Africa. They came one day and they stayed in a hotel. Then the next time they stole the towel. And the next time they came, they stole the bed sheets. Next time they came, they stole all the soap. And one day they looked at it and said, why are we even stealing small? Let's go and steal the hotel. And now they own the hotel. Checked in, refused to check out. And we, the owners of the hotel, have now become their workers. We have become the cooks and the cleaners and the bellmen and women in this hotel. So that's my analogy of how we have come this way. But if you look at it also, you look at even the continent of Africa, and particularly West Africa, how they treated the West African section, which was largely divided between the French and the British and the Portuguese have a little part of it. Most African countries today are named after resources that were found in them. Ghana used to be Gold Coast. There used to be Ivory Coast where they found ivory, right? The Nigeria that we're in now and Togo used to be known as Slave Coast. They didn't even hide it before they came and renamed it Niger area. And also people like to say nigger area because we have the largest concentration of Negroes. So that's how they treated us, and till tomorrow they still treat us like that. And until that part is resolved by Africans themselves, we will continue to have, because the people who are taking Africa for granted don't want leaders of Africa who know what they are doing. That's what they've done to bump off a lot of leaders during independence. Anybody who was too knowledgeable for them, they killed or they blackmailed or they stripped of, and they did it before then. Look at Oba Nobaisi of Benin was and took him away, and then King Jacobo, who the Akasa people fought against the British explorers who first came and wanted to, taking over their palm oil business. They finished all of them off. So they have weakened the African leadership completely. So we are left with dregs in this continent. And who are the dregs? If the president of France calls a meeting of African leaders today, even if it's 6 p.m., by tomorrow morning, all of them will be on the plane running to France. And the guy's like 30-something years old. And they wouldn't even ask, why should we come to you? What's the basis? Are we like your senior prefects? Yes. And some of these guys are in their 70s, but they will jump on the plane, including the one here. They will jump on the plane and they will run to France, to go and meet the French president. Small boy. French president used to work here as a bank teller in Nigeria before he moved back to France to go to the last time. Now he's president, he will invite everybody, and they've been running to the place. African leaders. I know there's need for a total overhaul of the African minds, awareness that gives the real Africans the leadership of the African continent. And until then, well, I'm sorry, I don't think there's hope. I don't think there's much hope.
Okay, so I hope Dr. Tosin Bugi is convinced, because I am highly convinced of your response to the question which was posed by Mr. Dr. Tosin Bugi. And I would just like to add one more thing before we take the next question, which is that the relationship of these international companies, in my view, with our country, with Nigeria, and how there's a very large difference between what they do out there and what they do in Nigeria. Of course, we can narrow it down to slavery, to colonialism, right, on the one hand. But I think there's a very vast range of other factors which can also be considered, which you have explained very, very succinctly, which is the fact that there's poor political will.
And the reason why there's poor political will is that where's the power? Where's the power that you have in the world, right? Because the system, the way your country itself was designed, it has been designed in such a way that you would eventually not have such a power to be able to contest a lot of things. For example, I did a research on gas flaring in the Niger Delta some years ago. I think it was in 2014, and I realized there are actually fines for gas flaring. For every amount of gas you flare into the anthroposphere or whatever, I cannot remember precisely how this was done, but there are fines. And these companies, at the end of each year, they go to the government and say, look, so how much is our fine for the year? Then the government says, okay, your fine is 1 billion euros. They say, okay, so here you go. Then they continue, right? And this fine that is paid to the Nigerian government, what is it used for? You know, it's not used for any sort of development. For example, we're in the middle of the NDCC scandal right now, right? Which is a body that's supposed to be responsible for development of the Niger Delta people. Anyway, so just what I'm just trying to point out is that there's a complex of factors which one can also consider alongside the slavery mentality and all that. So I would like to take the next question from our audience, which is from Imitayo Bankole, who says, what are the possibilities of solving some of the environmental issues here in Nigeria? Perhaps if we channel same energy pumped into human activism towards environmental activism. Okay, so
I agree with the entire Bankole Kompole. I think we need to be holistic about how we fight, environmental rights, not to separate it from, human rights, because environmental rights is also human rights. So, and I see that in other countries. Environmental activism is no longer, maybe over time, is no longer an esoteric department of rights where only a few people, special people, scientists fight for environmental rights. No, it should be packaged as part of human rights, that we fight for, so that, the way I'm fighting police brutality is the same way we fight environmental rights, because your survivor in any environment depends largely on the health of the environment, as it depends on the mentality of the police. Police might kill one person at a time, but a toxic environment can kill a million people over time within a short time. So, but how do we get people to understand what impact this has on people, right? To such an extent that people can take it serious. That we should fight for our environment as hard as we fight for our other rights.
Yes.
Social, economic, and human. I think I agree completely with Bankole on that one.
Yes, I also agree very, very completely. So I would just like to take the last question now, because now we should be rounding up very, very soon, because the question just keeps coming and coming and coming. Unfortunately, our time will not permit us to take all of the questions. So we'll just take a few over the next few minutes so we can round up today's session. So for my last question here, is that the role of environmental activism towards achieving the sustainable development is inevitable, right? I mean, we have talked on this severally. However, environmental activism in Nigeria can be seen as a confrontation with the power that be, right? As soon as you assume this responsibility of being an environmental activist, you're already seen as an antagonist, right? Your philosophies is no longer is anachronistic with their own concept of progress, right? So what national measure can civil society take to cushion against the oppression of these people in power, this so-called power that be? How do we put pressure? What can be the role of the civil society?
See, I'm a very, very strong proponent of direct action. So, so we can have indirect and direct action. I'm for direct action, because indirect action will work for people whose ears are open and are reasonable. Unfortunately, Nigeria don't have leaders who are reasonable enough. If you write a letter to your congressman or senator in Nigeria, he doesn't open it. If you send him a text message, he will not respond to it. They don't care about those things. So you don't have the same channels that you can communicate with your reps, even in the democracy, as you would in other places. So when we have this, I think people should just engage in direct action. I'm in favor of big protests, and that's why I love when women, men, kids take action against the oil companies, occupy their badges, they occupy their flow stations to draw their attention to take care of the environment. Because look, as we started this conversation, if you go to San Ramon in the US, which is the headquarters of Chevron, and not only are they concerned about just the environment, they measure air quality. The air they breathe must meet a standard.
Yeah.
If that quality drops, they will be panicking. But the same don't apply to the Niger Delta. If you go to the Niger Delta area today, you will see a Chevron badge. It's like Christmas tree. The village next to it don't even have. If there's light in the village, it's most likely coming from the gas flare, from Chevron or Shell or Total, F. So what they are doing to the Niger Delta environment, not only Niger Delta, to the environment of poorer countries, the global south, is what can be described as a crime against humanity. But they also control international institutions largely that regulate these places because it's double standard. The standard for Texas, exploration of oil in Texas, is different from the standard of exploration of oil in Nigeria. There's a practice, I don't know what they call it exactly in Texas. If they explore oil from a place, they must, if there's gas flaring, they must inject the gas back to the ground. But here, they just light it with, they just put a lighter on it with a cigarette. And there are some gas flares that have been burning for 20 years. You know the government implications of it. And nobody's doing something about it. When they just come and complain, the Nigerian government sends our own brothers, policemen, to go and shoot up the place. So I'm in support of direct action. We must get to a point where we declare an environmental emergency, just like every other emergency that's facing us in the country, and we fight for it and codify in our own law books and our own constitution the conditions under which we want our environment to be operated, and of which there are no exceptions to multinational corporations. It's not only in the environmental sector, even in employment. They abuse their quota. They bring in people from outside. Some of them don't have paper. Since they can't try in their own country, they fly in people, just fly them to the barge, to the oil flow stations and fly them back. They live above the law of our country. But you cannot run away from the fact that leadership is a major reason why everything seems to have fallen apart, according to Chinua Achebe.
Absolutely. Thank you once again for this, your very, very comprehensive response to the question that was asked. So I think now we are approaching the end now. And we have this very, very interesting question for you from the audience. Since it's a bit of a digress from our context, but I think now that we have the opportunity to ask you this now, and a lot of people are watching, I would like to take this as the last question of the day, which was asked by Toby Awolowo. His first question is, will Mr. Sowore be running for president again in 2023? And this first question is linked to the second one. If yes, would you invest in renewable energy if you become the president? And if you will, what type of renewable energies would you like to exploit?
In 2023, I have answered this several times, but in a more direct way. That I'm running from now. I'm not waiting for 2023. If we can get our freedom in 2020 or 2021, why do we have to wait for 2023? with regards to investment in renewable energy, if anybody followed our campaign during the last election, 2018, 2019, we made it very clear that one of the pillars upon which our campaign promises stand on is sustainability of the Nigerian economy and society. And I was one who talked mostly about bringing solar energy into the energy mix in Nigeria and using other renewable means of generating power, employment, and driving the Nigerian economy, including tech, right? So, because I know that the oil economy as it is now that we rely upon is a lazy economy, and that will expire with time. I happen to also have discussed actually classless education when I was running for office. And with the pandemic now, we're having classless education, but Nigeria has not been able to catch up with that because we were caught napping. We're not prepared. We are never prepared for anything. So, of course, renewable energy, one of the most important things that will form the fulcrum of an administration that will be run by me. And it includes in every sector, in the educational sector, in the energy sector, in the health sector, and in infrastructure sector. That everything that is available in this country today is able to sustain us if we manage them very well. And of course, I've described some of these things to you, and I know we don't have all the time to discuss today. So that this doesn't look like a campaign rally as opposed to a conversation about the environment.
Issues, yes, yes.
But most people, some of the guys who are following us, who have seen their comments were even part of the campaign at that time. And we answered this comprehensively, how we intend to sustain Nigerian economy on renewable sources of energy and make sure that everything is sustainable so that we don't consume everything we have and have nothing left in the nearest future, because that's the trajectory we are on now. There's no policy as we speak now about renewables in this country. We just do it haphazard. Up to today, a country of 200 million people, we don't have gas pipes to houses. You still have to roll your gas cylinders to go and buy gas. Sometimes it explodes, kills people. The whole place is, littered with generators, metals all over the place. But imagine that you're able to take charge of the country with all these policies that some of which I've explained today. It's obvious that we would have created an environment that is self-sustaining. Very obvious.
Yes. So thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Sowore. We are really glad to have you, to have given us almost 2 hours, 2 hours of your time. And to our audience, I would like to apologize if your question was not taken. This program was scheduled to actually be 1 hour, and now we are 35 minutes above 1 hour. But I would just like to quickly take a quick look at some of the questions. For example, Oluwatoyin Christiana talked about the role of institution in the Niger Delta and the impacts they can have towards environmental activism in moving forward the SDG in this area. Yes, definitely, this is something that can also still be openly discussed with the Green Institute even after this call. And after this specific session, Sagacious Sheyifumi Swart also said, how does the government aid or hinder the role of environmental activism? I'm sure Mr. Sowore has been able to do justice to this in the course of explaining some of the other questions that has been asked. And yes, Dr. James Akomu, I think it's more of a contribution that environmental activism should be for all, irrespective of our geographical location, tribe, position. There's urgent need for mental awareness of the importance of good environment. Absolutely, yes. Mr. Sowore also touched on this by even made a very, very good example of life expectancy right? Where people now die at 57 and 50, between 50 and 57, and this looks like the normal. And as a matter of fact, one very odd factor is that the life expectancy in the Niger Delta seems to be the lowest. I think I read about this some time ago due to the enormous impact of degradation that is going on in that region. I think Nigeria as a whole is 47. Then I think the Niger Delta is 43. I'm not sure. We have to check this out. But I think yes, relatively anyway, the life expectancy in Niger Delta is lower. So yes, Dr. James Akomu, just to confirm, of course, your position. So very lastly, Mr. Sowore, how will going forward? Yes, how will Sahara-Reporter will be able to support now environmental activism in Nigeria? I know Sahara-Reporter has done a lot in the past, right?
Yeah.
To support a lot of voiceless voices. As a matter of fact, I personally was a beneficiary of Sahara-Reporter because I wrote an article on Sahara-Reporter in 2015. I think it was the role of poverty in voting behavior in Nigeria. I think I remember sometimes in 2015. And I just sent that as an email just to the editor and it got published in Sahara-Reporter. So I would like to encourage anybody that has such articles. I'm sure you can have your way in Sahara-Reporter. But I don't know if maybe as a closing remark, you have something to say about how Sahara-Reporters can be able to help us promote environmental activism in Nigeria going forward.
I think, maybe I should not assume the role of Sahara because it's an institution that has grown beyond my person, even though I founded it and it runs on its own now. But I think that it was established to have bias for the environment. I remember that we've done a lot of stories about environmental issues. In fact, there was a time that some of our stories became part of debates in parliament in Europe when we were following on ExxonMobil and the pollution of the environment that was happening in Akwa Ibom in those days. So we still do, and people should understand that Sahara-Reporters is a citizen reporting platform. We actually generate stories from ordinary people. So if you see something, say something to us. To Sahara-Reporters.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Sowore. We really appreciate that you took out your almost 2 hours of time to be with us today. And to everyone that participated also, we are very grateful for everyone that joined for making this session to be very, very interactive for us all. And to the people in the opposition party, now you have heard it from Mr. Sowore that in 2023 you should get ready. He's coming for you again in 2023. And Mr. Sowore, I wish you the best of luck this time. And yes, I don't know if you have a final remark. If there's no final remark, okay. So in the absence of final remark, thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much to everybody. And bye for now.
Thank you.